Joining me is Sky News Political Editor Andrew Clennell. Andrew Clennell, thank you for your time. What is going on with this New South Wales government, and how much trouble is the Premier, Dominic Perrottet, himself in now?
Well, I think we'll find out next week when John Barilaro gives evidence in the parliamentary inquiry, and perhaps when ICAC has a look at it. I covered New South Wales politics for 15 years, Andrew, and frequently it's about doing deals, swapping favours, and I think you can get in a mindset if you've been in a 11 or 12-year government where there becomes a sort of normality about this. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's what's occurred here. And you don't think for a second what the public would think of such an appointment as John Barilaro. Look, I had a federal MP say to me today, look, we appoint politicians as high commissioners, etc. all the time. I said, yes, but you haven't set up the job first. So Barilaro sets up this $560,000 New York job, where presumably you wouldn't even have to do much. Who wouldn't want that job? And then he goes for it, and he seems to have the imprimatur of Ayres and potentially Perrottet to do it. And that's what is going on here. It's essentially, I guess Perrottet could have owned it and tried to argue Barilaro should get the post. Instead, he washed his hands of it, and so did Ayres. They said, oh, it was the public servant who chose him. That's being proven more and more to be false, and it's the cover-up that always gets you, doesn't it? But they just seem to have lost their way, these guys, in terms of who they should be acting in the best interests of, and that's the people of New South Wales. And I think that's one of the reasons the scandal has just gone on and on for weeks, because the public has a real distaste for this, and there's a desire to get to the truth, I think, and as every day goes on, we get closer to it.
Mate, if they thought he was the best guy for the job and that they were right to appoint him, they should have set out straight from the start. But obviously they must be ashamed of what they've done, because they said, no, yes, it wasn't us, Governor. And as you say, it increasingly looks like it was. To Canberra politics. The Albanese government today announced a new review of how many reviews have they announced so far? A new review of what weapons our defence forces should have and where they should be. And the two people running it include Sir Angus Houston, a former head of the Defence Force, who said these are frightening times, Ayres.
It's a fast-changing environment, and it's absolutely imperative that we review the current strategic circumstances, which I rate the worst I've ever seen in my career and lifetime.
But Andrew Clennell, the other person doing this review is former Labor Defence Minister Stephen Smith, who happens to be, apropos of what we were just talking about, who happens to be a good mate of the Prime Minister. Now, the Australian Defence Association says he's actually one of the 5 worst defence ministers that we've had in more than half a century. So why was he chosen, and why the criticism?
One of the 5 worst. There's so many bad ones that they can't come up with it being one of the top 2 or 3 or something. Look, I mean,
you've got to add Linda Reynolds, you've got to add Maurice Payne.
Oh my
Joel
gosh. Fitzgibbon.
Anyway, but why do you think they're after him?
But look, I mean, I just think that they're concerned because he cut the budget, and probably Julia Gillard told him to, because she and Wayne Swan wanted a surplus in 2012, but he was responsible for some of the biggest budget cuts in the portfolio was seen. And he is a friend of Albanese, and he did help on his campaign. So I don't think it's an ideal appointment. I've respect for Stephen Smith, but I think people will be looking with a lot more admiration on Angus Houston in terms of what he'll produce than Stephen Smith here. And one of the reporters raised today in the press conference, there might be a bit of a conflict there. Let's face it, a lot of the programs might have been decided upon in Smith and Houston's time. So it was a strange one. I mean, he did 2 press conferences in a day. As it turned out, I'd encourage the PM to do as many press conferences as possible so we can ask him questions. But this was one you could have almost put out in press release. because you're not because then you end up saying, well, I'm not going to preempt the review. So what are you announcing? As you say, just another review. And the other thing that puzzles me is they've been in power for 3 months. Couldn't they have lined this up in the first month? It's pretty important to do and get out of the way so that they know by the time of the budget next year exactly where they need to invest. Well, they say it'll be done by March. It better be.
Andrew Clennell, thank you so much for your time.